do loads of time lapses and hyperlapses. One of the most spectacular techniques between photography and videography. They work particularly well with drones. The Mini 3 has introduced the possibility to make them in vertical format. For users who are involved in social media platforms, vertical hyperlapses are a sensational way to post highly engaging and surprising content. Vertical hyperlapses can also be used in traditional short movies, mixed with the usual landscape format and with regular footage, to add extra interest for unexpected results. There are certain situations where vertical hyperlapses work particularly well, as we will see at the end of this video. The settings are practically the same as for traditional hyperlapses. The only difference is that we rotate the lens to vertical orientation by tapping on the icon next to the shutter. After entering the hyperlapse mode, we are presented with the same 4 modes. The mode 3 allows the use of the 2 sticks of the controller for movements in all directions, but I do not recommend using it this way. In hyperlapse the moves must be perfectly smooth, and it's not really possible to achieve them manually. The result would be very jumpy, with abrupt change of direction. The only way I use free mode is for time lapses, where the point of view is static. In other words, the aircraft hovers in a static position. Static time lapses are very interesting when the scene already contains a good amount of movement. The mode circle is the only one able to perform perfect rotation around the target. For all other moves I tend to use the excellent waypoints, but orbiting is not easy to replicate. In circle mode we select the target by drawing a box around it and then choose the speed and the direction, clockwise or anti-clockwise. It is possible to use the remote controller to modify the elevation. But I suggest keeping the moves as smooth as possible and avoiding abrupt changes of direction. The mode course lock doesn't work properly at the moment in landscape mode, as there are frequent jumps of the gimbal. It performs better in vertical orientation with occasional small issues. I never use it, as it is possible to perform the same moves in a much more powerful and flexible way using the magic Waypoints mode. Waypoints is the king of hyperlapse modes, the one I use most of the time. It works by creating a mission with different points. We fly to the point where we want our hyperlapse to start, and after framing the scene, we tap on the first icon on the left to set the first point. The position of the drone and the orientation of the camera are stored in memory. We then fly to the next point, frame the shot and tap on the second icon. In most cases I prefer to set only 2 points for very smooth results. After hitting the shutter, the aircraft and the gimbal will handle the smooth transition from one point to the next. Every waypoint mission is stored in memory and can be retrieved to perform the same hyperlapse in different light conditions, different times of the day, or different seasons. This is extremely handy. I have done a specific video about waypoint hyperlapses. You can watch it by clicking on the link on the screen. There are 2 settings to specify in all different modes: the interval between each photo and the length in seconds of the hyperlapse. The minimum interval is 1 photo every 2 seconds, but the camera needs some time to buffer each shot. Therefore, with this interval we cannot use a shutter speed longer than 1/5 of the second, which is not ideal. An interval of 1 shot every 3 seconds is the one I use the most. It works well when the movement comes from cars, people walking, boats. An interval of 1 shot every 4 seconds works better when the movement comes mostly from clouds. 1 shot every 5 seconds would be useful in transition from day to night, but requires a shooting time too long for the regular battery. This is where the special battery with over 40 minutes of life available for the Mini 3 comes in very handy. As you can see, the longer the interval between shots, the faster the movement in the hyperlapse will be. In most hyperlapses I like to aim for a length of around 12 seconds, which is obtained by shooting 300 photos if using a frame rate of 24 frames per second. This length makes it easy to compute the shooting time needed, as it takes 10 minutes to shoot 300 photos with an interval of 1 photo every 2 seconds, 15 minutes with 1 photo every 3 seconds, 20 minutes at an interval of 4 seconds, and so on. Before hitting the shutter, we must enter the setting for exposure. We obviously use manual exposure and manual white balance. The most important factor to master for time-lapses and hyperlapses is motion blur. I'm not going too deep about motion blur here, as I've done a specific video about it. If you're interested in hyperlapses, I would suggest watching it by using the link on the screen. To keep things simple, I prefer to use a shutter speed value of 1 second whenever possible to optimize motion blur. With longer interval between each shot, a slower shutter speed would be ideal. But a drone flying is not as stable as a camera on a sturdy tripod, so longer shutter speed would introduce unwanted blur. I find that the shutter speed of 1 second is a good compromise. Since the Mini 3 has a fixed aperture, the only other setting is ISO. It is better to keep it at the base 100 value, but if we should need to increase the exposure, we can raise it to 200 or 400 without major losses in quality. To get such a long shutter speed, we must use ND filters to reduce the amount of light entering the sensor and avoid overexposure. Mini 3 gathers plenty of light due to the extremely wide aperture of the lens. When taking hyperlapses on sunny days, I often been unable to use the required shutter speed of 1 second, even though I've been using an ND 1000 filter, a very strong one. I recommend using a set of ND filter with very high values for hyperlapses in the middle of a sunny day. You will find in the description a link to the one I use. To show the importance of motion blur, let's compare a hyperlapse taken with the correct shutter speed using ND filters to another one shot without ND filters at a much faster shutter speed. As you can see, the second one doesn't have any motion blur, and the result really hurts the eyes. After taking all the photo needed, an hyperlapse is automatically created by the app. The quality of the auto-generated movie is actually quite good with the Mini 3. Obviously, much better result can be obtained by post-processing the photo saved in RAW formats, but since many users want to post the resulting movies on social media, in many cases without the use of a computer, I've decided to show in this video only hyperlapses generated automatically by the app. Let's see how vertical hyperlapse performs in different types of scenes. Hyperlapses by the sea where the main movement comes from the waves are not particularly interesting. Regular footage works better, even better if in slow motion. Also, in this one, the sun reflected by the waves doesn't really help. Better in this case, as there is a mix of movement coming from boats and cars. Here the vertical format works well, as I could frame the highway dotted with cars together with this town, revealing Mount Etna. In a similar scene, again the vertical format can show the steep stairway, the highway and Mount Etna at the same time. In both cases I would have preferred some nice clouds, but no luck. In this nice fishing village, I was hoping for a bit of action from boats, cars and people walking around the harbor. But there was not enough movement. Disappointing. Here the scene is more interesting, with a streak of cars leading towards the other village on the bay gradually revealed. In this one, the vertical format works really well, revealing the bay at the top of the town, with the cars forming a circle and the leading line. Click on this link to watch my video about regular hyperlapses made with the Mini 3. And don't forget to hit the like button if you found this video interesting. Thank you.